A pale blue light blinked above the locked elevator panel. The 5th floor of the Sorin estate was always dimmer than the rest of the house, as if the sunlight itself refused to enter. Outside its doors, the rest of the mansion buzzed with sterile precision. Whispers of polished floors, tray carts that made no noise, and staff who never looked up. But behind the frosted glass in a room that no one cleaned and no one spoke about, lived a boy who hadn't uttered a word in over 2 years. His name was Caleb. His father was Mitchell Sorin, a name that hadn't appeared in a press release since his wife died, and yet his consumer goods empire remained omnipresent in American homes. From microwavable meals to antibacterial wipes, the Sorin logo sat quietly in millions of pantries. Mitchell himself had become more myth than man, withdrawing from the world. After cancer took Emma, his wife leaving behind a child the world said was broken. Caleb, just 7, was labeled early. Non-verbal, unreachable, autistic, a liability for someone like Mitchell, whose boardroom reputation had been built on streamlining chaos. In the wake of Emma's death, Mitchell poured millions into specialists, all of whom left with cold reports and recommendations, none of which made Caleb speak. The boy had stopped crying, stopped screaming, until one day he screamed again. It was Brianna Cole's 5th day on the job when it happened. She wasn't supposed to be there. Cleaners like her weren't even issued clearance cards for the upper floors. She swept entryways, scrubbed baseboards, changed out trash liners for rooms with gold-plated thermostats and silent pianos. She was paid by the hour, $12.30 of it. No benefits, no questions asked. She took the job because the agency said it was cash-friendly and non-confrontational. She kept it because Nova, her 5-year-old daughter, needed new speech therapy after the county clinic changed its policy again. Brianna moved through the house like air-soft sneakers gloves, always on eyes downward. She spoke only when asked, worked quickly, and left rooms the way she found them, except cleaner. But that Thursday, as she was rinsing a cloth in the downstairs utility sink, she heard it. A sound that cut through marble. A boy's scream. Not tantrum, not irritation, but raw, high-pitched panic. She looked toward the staircase. No one moved. "You're not allowed up there." The voice belonged to Ava, the house manager. Sharp suit, clipped tone, the kind of woman who folded napkins into corners even when no guests came. "I know," Brianna said softly. "But someone's hurt. That's the 5th floor. That's Mr. Sorin's son. We do not intervene unless we're called." "But no one's going." Ava straightened. "Then it's not your concern." But Brianna was already climbing. Each step creaked in protest. The hall narrowed. The 5th floor was unlike the rest of the estate. No recessed lighting, no framed photos. The carpet gave way to wood, the scent of antiseptic replaced by something older. Dust, crayons, silence. Then she saw him. Caleb sat curled in a corner at the end of the hallway, near a half-opened door with no nameplate. He rocked violently, hands over ears, forehead marked with red splotches. His body shook in a rhythm too practiced. "No, no, no," he whispered through gritted teeth. Brianna didn't touch him, didn't speak. She slowly knelt against the opposite wall, palms open in her lap. Her grandmother used to call it making a circle, a space where children could enter if they wanted, where they would not be touched or looked at too directly. She opened her hand, tapped her thumb to her pinky, a soft sign. Safe. Minutes passed. Caleb's rocking slowed. He glanced once, then again. He inched forward. He collapsed into her lap. Just as Mitchell Sorin walked in, his presence filled the hall before his voice did. Charcoal grey shirt, cufflinks undone. unshaved but not carelessly, eyes that scanned for failure like heat sensors. "What are you doing?" Brianna didn't flinch. "I'm just listening, sir." Her voice was steady. She didn't apologize. "Your son doesn't need fixing. He needs to feel safe." Mitchell's hand clenched the doorframe. He looked at the boy, then at her. His jaw shifted, but he said nothing. Later that night, Ava handed Brianna a typed notice. Mitchell wanted to see her again in the library. No explanation, no warning. She folded the note. She had worked 4 jobs in the last year, lost 2 because of her skin, and 1 because of her accent when tired. But this moment, this boy, felt like her brother Germain. He had been 7 too, and no one had come for him in time. The library of the Soren estate was nothing like Brianna expected. She thought of dusty shelves, ladders on wheels, maybe even a fireplace like the ones in hotel lobbies. But the room was cold modern and too quiet. Light bled through a single rectangular skylight, casting sharp lines across a conference-style table. The books were uniform, white spines, no titles. More for symmetry than for reading. Mitchell Soren sat at the head of the table. Sleeves rolled just enough to show his watch, but not his wrists. He didn't rise when she entered. "Sit." Brianna did, folding her hands over the faded knees of her jeans. Her gloves were still in her apron pocket. "I want to know exactly what happened upstairs." She met his eyes, slow and careful. "Your son was hurting. No one came. I did." "That's not your role." "I know." He waited, expecting her to shrink, to say sorry, but she didn't. Mitchell tapped his pen once against the table's edge. "And what do you think qualifies you to calm a child who hasn't let a single adult near him in 2 years? Nothing on paper." She reached into her apron pocket, pulled out a photo, creased, water-stained. "That's my brother Germain. He had autism too. Passed at 10. We didn't have specialists. We had sign language, food colors, and story time." Mitchell barely looked. "So you're improvising." "I'm remembering." He leaned back, eyes narrowed. The air between them tightened, like the moment before a storm breaks glass. Then he spoke flat and quick. "You'll move into the side guest suite. That way you'll be nearby in case he needs more moments." Brianna blinked. "Sorry, I've already cleared it with Ava. You'll be compensated double. Weekends off. A car for errands. I'll give you a key card for restricted access. You're hiring me to be his—" "I'm not hiring you." He looked away. "I'm asking for a temporary solution until he regresses again. Or until you quit." There was no warmth in his voice, no recognition of what had happened upstairs, just a transaction. Brianna thought of Nova, asleep in her cousin's pull-out bed, whispering her alphabet in near-perfect timing with the ceiling fan. She thought of how Nova had cried the first day Brianna had to leave before dawn and return after dark. Mitchell stood. "You'll start tomorrow, 7 a.m., don't be late." And just like that, she was dismissed. Outside the estate, she sat on the stone steps and texted her cousin, "Got bumped up? Bigger room. Not fired. Will explain." No one knew what she'd seen on that 5th floor. The look in Caleb's eyes as he curled inward, the silent request for something he didn't know how to ask for. The next morning, Ava handed her a packet. "No NDA. No official role. But don't speak to anyone about the child, not even the other staff. Mr. Soren doesn't want gossip." Brianna flipped through the pages. Nothing was signed. Not by her, not by him. There was no title, no job description, just a stack of unofficial expectations. Her new room was on the 3rd floor facing west. 1 twin bed, a small desk, a lamp with a chipped shade, a window overlooking the iron bell tree in the courtyard. She unpacked her gloves, a tattered journal, and Nova's framed crayon drawing of the two of them holding hands near a house with no roof. That first week, she didn't try to teach Caleb anything. She sat in his room each morning, back to the wall, placing 2 wooden blocks near her knees. She didn't speak unless he looked. When he flinched, she flinched with him. When he made a sound, she echoed it softly. On Thursday, she brought a blue plastic truck. She didn't offer it. Just let it sit in the corner of the room while she traced circles on the floor with her fingertip. He didn't touch it that day, but he didn't kick it away either. Downstairs, the rest of the house continued its machine-like order. Mitchell met with logistics directors via satellite-updated packaging specs, signed off on factory relocations. He never asked about Caleb directly, but he began to check the security feed from the 5th floor twice a day. Each time, he saw the same image, Brianna sitting in the same spot, unmoving, as if willing herself invisible. One evening, as the house grew quiet and the sunset painted the walls, Amber Brianna stayed a little longer. She hummed, low soft, an old melody her grandmother used to hum when Jermaine pressed his face against her shoulder. Caleb didn't respond, but when she left, she found the blue truck had been moved closer to the center of the room, and on the library table downstairs beside Mitchell's untouched dinner lay a folder labeled Behavioral Update, Caleb Soren. It was blank. He never filled it in. The 5th floor remained unspoken territory for everyone else. The house staff avoided even looking toward the stairs. Their silence wasn't just out of obedience. It was laced with fear. Not of the boy, but of the unshakable belief that something tragic lingered there. Something that couldn't be cleaned, folded, or filed away. By the end of her 2nd week, Brianna had memorized the sounds of the floorboards. She could tell when Caleb was pacing, when he was curled against the radiator, when he was spinning one of the old ceiling fan chains around his fingers. But nothing prepared her for Friday. It started with a soft rhythm, knuckles tapping. Then came the thuds. Not loud at first, but fast, hard, deliberate. Brianna dropped the tray of color cards she'd been sorting and ran down the hall. He was in the corner again, fists clenched, rocking violently, forehead already bruising. She dropped to her knees, not too close. "Caleb, it's Bri. You're okay. I'm not going to touch you." He didn't stop. She reached slowly into her hoodie pocket and pulled out the green card with the safety sign, tapped her thumb to Pinky. Safe. He wouldn't look. So she sang, "Off to sleep, my baby dear. Close your eyes, the stars are near." Her voice trembled. She hadn't sung that lullaby since Nova was 2. Caleb's body slowed, barely. He gasped once, then twice. "Help," he whispered. 1 syllable, 1 word. She moved closer, held her hand open between them, palm up, not forcing, just waiting. He crawled into her lap and wept, not loud, not wild, but steady like a dam with cracks. That's how Mitchell found them. The sound of his shoes stopped cold just inside the doorway. His voice, when it came, was lower than usual. "What the hell is this?" Brianna didn't move. "He asked for help, that's all." Mitchell walked forward slowly. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at his son now, curled into the chest of a woman he barely knew. "You're not a therapist." "I never said I was." "You're not trained for this." "I am. Just not by the kind of people you hire." He looked at her for a long time, the kind of look meant to measure weight, worth, danger. "You're good at waiting," he muttered. "So was he," she said softly, touching Caleb's back. "Too good." That evening, Mitchell didn't eat in the library. He stood in the kitchen instead, watching the security footage on his phone. Caleb in her arms. Brianna rocking slowly, humming the lullaby again, no lyrics this time. Ava approached with her usual clipboard. The office in Chicago sent over new behavioral staff contracts for review. Should I schedule interviews? He didn't answer right away. Is there a file on Brianna Cole? Just the basic employment log. Cleaner assigned through Haddon Services. No formal education noted. No licenses. Anything flagged. No complaints. Some late clockouts. She requested time off twice for her daughter's appointments. Mitchell tapped the screen to pause the video. Get me a list of everyone she's worked for in the last 3 years. And don't tell her. Ava hesitated. Is there a problem? I want to know why she's the first person that child has touched without screaming. Downstairs in her small room, Brianna sat on the floor, Nova's drawing taped to the wall in front of her. She ran her fingers along the edge of the green safety card. Jermaine used to have episodes like that. No one knew what to do, so the neighbors called him possessed. They stopped calling after he died. The next day, Caleb pushed the green card toward her without being asked. They played a color game. No words, just taps and slides. Blue meant stop. Red meant laugh. Yellow meant spin. For the first time, he smiled. It wasn't big, but it was there. Mitchell stood outside the room, unseen, watching through the gap in the doorway. He didn't enter. Not yet. That night, he opened a locked drawer in his late wife's wardrobe room, a space he hadn't touched in 22 months. Inside was a music box, a file labeled Caleb, early reports and a photograph of Emma, holding Caleb as a newborn, her face blurred by time. On the back of the photo was one line written in soft pencil, "Don't let the world decide how he belongs." Mitchell closed the drawer but kept the photo. He carried it back to his room, where the lamps never turned on unless set by automation. He turned the switch manually for the first time. The following Monday, Brianna was called to the back veranda, not by Ava this time, but by Mitchell himself. He stood near the edge of the marble patio, arms crossed, wearing a plain black sweater. No tablet, no phone, just a clipboard resting on the stone table beside him. As she approached, he gestured to the chair opposite. "No cameras out here. Sit." The morning air was crisp, tinged with the faint scent of rosemary from the estate's overgrown herb wall. Brianna sat, glancing at the clipboard. "It's blank," she noted. Mitchell looked down. "It is." They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that feels less like awkwardness and more like a test of who breaks first. Then he spoke. "I want to offer you something, but it's not a job. It's an arrangement." She leaned back, wary. "What kind of arrangement?" "You'll continue living on the property. You'll continue what you're doing with Caleb. I won't interfere. Ava will handle logistics. You'll have weekends free. There's already something like that in place. Not formally." He tapped the clipboard once with his finger. "This isn't a contract. There won't be one. You won't have a title. Nothing to make it seem like I'm trusting you more than I should." Brianna raised her brow. "Because that would be a problem. Not for me. For the people watching me. Investors, staff, family offices." His voice was even. Too even. They wouldn't understand this. Brianna folded her hands in her lap. "I've lived my whole life under people who didn't understand me. I can handle that. But I won't be a shadow." He nodded once. "Fair." Ava arrived moments later, handing Brianna a new keycard and a modest blue folder. It held a schedule. Blocks of time marked observation, quiet play, and adaptive rest. No signature, no title, just her name written in neat print, Cole B. That afternoon she entered Caleb's room to find the blue plastic truck turned upside down and a stack of color tiles neatly arranged beside it. He looked up, blinking twice, then handed her the red tile. She tapped it. Red means laugh, remember. He didn't smile, but he tapped it back. In the hallway, Mitchell watched from the corner camera feed again. This time he turned off the audio. Instead of listening to what was said, he focused on their movements, synchrony rhythm, the pauses that filled in for language. Later that night, he sat alone in the darkened family room where no one else went. A room filled with his wife's plants, now overgrown and pressing against the glass walls. He opened the music box he'd found the week before. It played a waltz, faint, slow, warped by years. He placed the photograph of Emma and Caleb beside it, then pulled from his pocket a folded sheet of paper, the estate's guardianship protocol for minors with developmental conditions. It was unsigned. He tucked it beneath the music box. Back in her room, Brianna stood by the window, watching the iron bell tree sway in the wind. Nova's voice played in her head. "Mama, why do rich people have so many doors?" She had laughed then. Now she thought about how many doors Caleb had behind his silence, and how few people had bothered to knock. That night, Caleb had a nightmare. He screamed once, then went silent. Brianna reached his room in seconds. He was curled up, shaking. She crouched beside him, whispering, "It's okay. It's dark now, but it won't stay dark. I'm here." He reached out, not to touch, but to press the yellow card to her knee. Yellow. "Spin." She smiled. "You want to play?" He nodded once. She spun the card slowly between her fingers, and somewhere between the circles, he fell asleep again. Downstairs, Mitchell scrolled through emails. One from a behavioral consultant at Belridge Institute, quoting a 6-month, 140,000 program. He marked it as read, then moved it to trash. Then, after a pause, he deleted it entirely. Rain tapped softly against the wide windows of the playroom. It was a Tuesday, the third one, since the day Caleb handed Brianna the red tile without prompting. Since then, their days had developed a rhythm, loose but present, like an unspoken agreement written in the language of taps, glances, and colors. That morning, Brianna arrived with something new, a set of oversized wooden puzzle pieces, each painted with a different shade and texture. She laid them out on the carpet in silence. Caleb didn't approach right away. He sat near the radiator as he often did, fiddling with the frayed corner of a blanket. But when she connected two of the pieces, blue and green the ones he seemed to favor, he scooted closer. "This one feels like sandpaper," she whispered, running her finger over a brown tile. "Rough but strong." Caleb reached for it. His fingertips hovered, then pressed gently. "Hard," he said. Brianna froze. It wasn't just a word. It was a choice. Later, she recorded the moment in her worn notebook. Not because she needed to report it. There was still no official log, but because moments like this had to be marked. Otherwise, they vanished. Downstairs in the house's command office, Mitchell reviewed quarterly cost metrics on biodegradable packaging. Numbers rose, dipped, flattened. He leaned back, removed his glasses, and turned to the feed from the 5th floor. The camera now showed Caleb and Brianna lying on the rug tiles, spread around them like a quiet mosaic. Mitchell watched as the boy touched the green tile, tapped it twice, then pushed it gently toward Brianna. Mitchell smiled, only slightly. But it was real. That evening he approached the playroom in person. He knocked, which was new. Brianna opened the door. "You're early," she said softly. "I don't have meetings this evening." He looked past her at Caleb, now sitting upright, sorting the puzzle tiles by texture. Has he used that word before? Hard no. That's new. Mitchell entered cautiously, sat on the edge of a low bench near the bookshelf. "Do you mind if I—" "Stay a minute." Brianna shook her head. "It's your house. But it's your space now." She watched as Caleb picked up the yellow tile. He glanced at his father, paused, then set the tile back down. Mitchell leaned forward, elbows on knees. He liked yellow when Emma was alive. We had this rug in the sunroom. It had yellow birds on it. Brianna nodded, waiting. Mitchell didn't speak again for several minutes. Then quietly, after she passed, he screamed every night. For weeks. Then he just stopped. He didn't stop feeling, just stopped thinking it mattered. Mitchell looked at her. You talk like someone who knows. I do. She didn't elaborate. That night, Mitchell retrieved a box from the basement storage corridor, a section most staff avoided due to poor lighting and heavy dust. Inside were Caleb's old art supplies, dried markers, broken crayons, watercolor pages with shaky rainbows. He selected a small sketch dated in Emma's handwriting, Caleb Orthos, our garden. There were trees, a yellow patch of sun, and a stick figure with big hair. Mitchell didn't recognize it. He brought it upstairs and left it outside the playroom door. No note. Just the drawing placed inside a simple black frame. The next morning it hung on the playroom wall. No one said who had framed it. No one needed to. On Thursday, Mitchell joined them again. Sat on the carpet this time, awkwardly legs crossed. Brianna handed him a red tile. He fumbled it. Caleb giggled. It was the first sound of joy Brianna had ever heard from him. Red means laugh, right? Mitchell asked. Caleb nodded, then tapped the yellow tile. Spin, he whispered. Mitchell looked to Brianna. She picked up the tile and spun it on its edge like a coin. Caleb clapped once. For a moment, everything in the room felt small and full. Later that evening, Ava approached Mitchell during his walk across the Lower East Wing. Your sister called again. Tell her I'm unavailable. She mentioned the trust update. You've delayed signing. Mitchell paused at the iron door leading to the former sunroom. I'm re-evaluating the guardianship clause. Sir, I'm not signing it yet. Things are changing. He entered the room without waiting for a reply. The sunroom's furniture was still covered in sheets. The yellow rug was rolled in the corner. Mitchell bent down, unrolled a section, and ran his hand over the faded birds. Later, Brianna found a blank white envelope slid under her door. Inside was a typed list of emergency contacts, Caleb's food preferences, old medication logs. At the bottom, one line stood out. If something happens to me, start here. No name, no signature. But she knew who had written it. The hidden room wasn't locked. It didn't have to be. No one ventured that far into the pantry corridor. Past the dry storage beyond the second freezer unit, behind a shelf lined with expired seasonings, sat a warped wooden panel. Dust layered the floor like skin that hadn't been shed. Brianna only found it because she dropped a bottle of vinegar, and it rolled farther than it should have. When she knelt to retrieve it, her fingers caught the lip of a draft. She pressed against the panel. It gave way. Behind it, a narrow passage opened into a small room. No light, no ventilation, just silence and the weight of something forgotten. She turned on her phone flashlight. Inside were boxes, labeled not by year or event, but initials. E.S. Emma Soren. The air carried a scent of dried lavender, long past sweet. A music box rested on a shelf. Beside it, a dusty jar of paintbrushes. 3 framed photos. One showed Caleb, maybe age 3, holding a yellow pinwheel in one hand and clinging to Emma's coat with the other. His eyes were clearer, then mouth slightly open, as if caught mid-giggle. Another photo showed Emma and Mitchell, before the suits, before the graying temples. She wore a loose braid. He smiled openly. The third was a sketch framed but unsigned. A woman with closed eyes, one hand cupping a child's head. Brianna stepped back. This wasn't storage. This was a pause. A place Mitchell had once entered, then never returned to. That evening she found him standing under the iron bell tree, no coat collar unbuttoned, staring up through the branches. "It still rings when the wind hits right," he said, without turning. "I found her room," Brianna said gently. He didn't react. "It's not locked, but it feels sealed." He nodded. "I left it that way, after the funeral." "Why?" "Because I knew if I went in, I'd stay." She waited. He looked up again. "I was raised by men who handled grief like rust. Something you scrub away until it stops spreading. But grief doesn't rust. It floods. Sometimes the only way out is through it." He turned toward her. "You talk like a therapist. I talk like someone who's lost." He met her eyes, and for the first time, he looked like someone not trying to win a negotiation. Back in the playroom, Caleb had begun drawing. Nothing detailed, mostly loops and lines. But one sketch caught Brianna's eye. A bell, a stick figure, a smaller one beside it. She pointed. "Is that me?" Caleb didn't answer, but he slid the paper toward her. The next day, Mitchell joined them during free play again. He'd stopped wearing his watch, as if time inside that room no longer applied. He sat beside Caleb and mimicked his motions with the red and green tiles. At one point, Caleb placed a hand on his father's knee. Mitchell froze. Then gently, he laid his hand over his son's. No words passed, but the connection held. Later that week, Brianna received a call from the local speech clinic. Nova had been bumped from the waiting list. "Your name was flagged," the receptionist said. "A donor covered the next 6 months. Anonymous." Brianna hung up slowly. That night, she passed Mitchell in the hallway. "I don't need charity," she said quietly. "Then don't treat it like that," he replied. He didn't stop walking. In her room, Brianna opened her notebook and wrote one word across the margin: "Stay." The next morning, Caleb waited by the door for her. He held the yellow tile in one hand, the green in the other. And between them, a piece of white paper, folded in half with one wobbly word, written in orange crayon, "Mama." She knelt beside him. "Is this for me?" He nodded, just once. And outside, the iron bell rang. The call came just after dusk. Ava answered the front line as she always did, but this time her voice didn't return to its usual clipped rhythm. Instead, she moved quickly, quietly, past the lower kitchen through the atrium and to Mitchell's private study. There she paused at the door and knocked once. "Mitchell, it's the Department of Child Services." He didn't react immediately, just stared at the spreadsheet open on his monitor. Quarterly exports broken down by distribution region. Ava cleared her throat. "It's not routine. They're coming tonight." He turned his head slowly. "What did they say?" "A report was filed alleging Caleb is being kept isolated, that his medical needs are being neglected." Mitchell stood. "By who?" They didn't say. But the call came from a former employee line. His face went still. "Sylvia." He left the room without another word. On the 5th floor, Brianna was folding a soft blue blanket, while Caleb arranged puzzle pieces in color rows. The rain had returned, gentle but persistent, tapping out a rhythm on the window like a nervous hand. Then came the knock. Not from Mitchell. 2 women entered. One wore a grey suit clipboard in hand. The other, a young man in a navy polo with a county badge clipped to his collar. "We're from Child Services. We received a report and need to check the miners' welfare immediately." Brianna stood slowly. "This isn't a good time." "That's not your decision. Where is the boy's legal guardian?" Mitchell arrived moments later, voice steady but cold. "I am. And unless you have a warrant, you are entering on my goodwill. So choose your next steps carefully. We're here on an emergency tip. If we leave, we report non-cooperation to the court. Caleb was watching, frozen. His fingers twitched near the red tile. Brianna crouched beside him. "It's okay, baby. Just stay near me." The woman in the grey suit took a step forward. "Has he been evaluated recently? Does he have speech therapy? ABA, medical supervision?" Brianna stood. "He's been protected, respected, watched without being watched. That's more than any program has given him." The young man took a step closer. "What's your role here exactly? You're not listed anywhere in the employee ledger." "I'm a cleaner," she said plainly. "Then why is he clinging to you like you're his mother?" Caleb whimpered. Then quietly, almost breathlessly, he said, "Dada." The room stopped. Mitchell's hand dropped to his side, fingers trembling. He dropped to his knees in front of his son. "Caleb, Dada," Caleb said again. His voice broke midway, but the word was whole. Mitchell pulled him close arms, rapping slowly, then tightly. "It's okay. I've got you." The young man lowered his clipboard. The woman in grey hesitated, mouth open, but silent. "We'll be filing a provisional report," she murmured. "But I think we've seen enough for now." They left without another word. Outside the room, Ava was waiting. "She reported you, didn't she, Sylvia?" Mitchell stood slowly. "Yes. She never forgave me for firing her, for what she said to Brianna." Brianna hadn't moved. She still stood beside Caleb, who now sat against the wall, fingers running slowly over the green tile. That evening, Mitchell met with his attorney. "There's going to be a hearing. Not criminal, but reputational. If Sylvia testifies, she'll bury you under innuendo and class bias." Mitchell didn't blink. "Then we testify too." The next morning, Brianna received a subpoena and a note handwritten in strong, slanted strokes. "You don't have to say anything you're not ready to say. But I'll be there. M." She read it twice, folded it, slipped it into her notebook beside the red and yellow tiles Caleb had given her last week. Nova called that night before bed. "Did you know I said 4 new words today?" Brianna smiled into the phone. "I believe it. Which one was your favorite?" "Sleepy. Like when you say you're tired but still awake." She closed her eyes. "I love you, baby. I'll see you soon." As she hung up, Caleb appeared in her doorway. He held out a folded piece of paper with one shaky word, Tay. She reached out, took his hand. "I'm not going anywhere." Outside, the iron bell swayed, but made no sound. The courtroom was sterile. Soft grey walls, fluorescent lighting that hummed just above human hearing, and chairs too hard for the hours they demanded. Mitchell arrived in a dark navy suit, tailored but not flashy. He sat beside his attorney without looking at the gallery. Beside him, Brianna wore a muted tan cardigan over a plain black dress. She hadn't spoken the whole ride over. The judge, a woman in her late 50s with a clipboard instead of a laptop, called the hearing to order. This wasn't a criminal trial, it was administrative, a public review of Caleb's welfare based on an anonymous report later attributed to Sylvia Caro, former executive assistant to Mitchell Soren. Sylvia walked in like she owned the room. Burgundy blazer, pearl earrings, lips pursed in polite concern. She took the stand first. "My concern isn't personal," she began, smoothing her skirt. "It's ethical. That child has been isolated. His so-called caretaker has no credentials, no background in behavioral health." She glanced at Brianna. "And she doesn't belong in that house." She was terminated from another job for being confrontational, unprofessional. She's, well, just not the right fit for someone of Caleb's needs. Brianna didn't flinch. Mitchell leaned forward, but his lawyer placed a hand on his sleeve. "Not yet," Sylvia continued. "She plays at being maternal. But this isn't a charity case. It's a vulnerable minor with complex requirements. And she's not qualified. The judge adjusted her glasses. Ms. Caro, are you suggesting that the child was in immediate danger? Sylvia paused. I'm saying he was not receiving the proper care. Then came Brianna's turn. She stood slowly, walked to the front with calm steps, looked at the judge directly. I'm not a therapist, she began, and I'm not a hero. She paused, letting the quiet settle. I'm a cleaner, a mother, and someone who lost her brother, Jermaine, because he was treated like a problem to fix, not a person to love. She held up a paper, Caleb's drawing of the bell and 2 figures. He gave me this, without being asked, without prompting. That's the first time he communicated without fear. The judge leaned forward. Do you have any professional references? No. But I have a child who now laughs, who says Dada and Mama, who sleeps through the night for the first time in years. Why do you stay? Because someone stayed for me once, and because I believe Caleb deserves a family that sees him, not just his diagnosis. Sylvia scoffed from her seat. This is emotional manipulation. The judge turned to her. You're no longer on the stand, Miss Caro. Mitchell stood. May I speak? The judge nodded. He's my son. But I didn't know how to father him. I treated him like a project, hired experts, built plans, scheduled silence. He looked at Brianna. She sat on a floor and waited for him to come to her. I didn't know love could look like that. The judge leaned back, fingers steepled. This court cannot award or remove custody today, but it can make a formal recommendation to child services regarding care suitability. She turned to Brianna. You were called here to defend your presence. Instead, you showed us a form of caregiving that requires no license, only heart. To Sylvia, your concerns may have come from protocol, but they reek of something else. A pause. Classism, and perhaps more. Sylvia stiffened. The judge looked to Mitchell. Mr. Soren, you are advised to formalize Brianna Cole's status within your household, whether through legal guardianship, employment documentation, or custody designation. Her presence must be protected. She tapped her gavel once. This hearing is concluded. As the room emptied, Sylvia lingered behind. You'll regret this, Mitchell. You've invited a liability into your home. He turned to her. I invited a miracle. You brought noise. Don't come back. Outside the courthouse, the sky was pale and windless. Brianna stood beside Mitchell in the parking lot, quiet. That wasn't easy, he said. It wasn't supposed to be. He opened the passenger door for her. She didn't get in right away. I don't need a title, but I won't stay invisible. Mitchell nodded. Then I'll make sure you never are, again. That night, Caleb fell asleep, holding both the red and yellow tiles in each hand. On Brianna's desk, a new file waited, signed this time. Provisional Guardian Authorization. Caleb Soren Mitchell had written it in pen. Under her name, it read, Cole B. Present by choice. Spring arrived without fanfare. The ivy crept farther across the east wall, and the old iron bell swayed more often, catching gusts even when the air below remained still. Caleb's laughter now echoed, not often, not loudly, but enough to pull the corners of Mitchell's mouth into shapes they hadn't formed in years. The playroom had changed. Gone were the surveillance cameras. In their place, soft lighting rows of books and a bulletin board cluttered with Caleb's sketches, crayon bursts, tile patterns, and one drawing that showed 4 stick figures under a tree. Mitchell, Brianna, Caleb, and Nova. No names. But the image was unmistakable. One afternoon, while Caleb napped, Brianna found herself outside under the iron bell tree, trimming back the overgrown grass. Mitchell joined her, not in a suit, but in rolled sleeves and an old college sweatshirt faded at the shoulders. He knelt beside her, holding pruning shears. "I've been thinking," he said. "About permanence." She glanced at him. "You want to make this official?" He nodded. "I've already filed a draft of the updated estate plan." Brianna stood, brushing soil from her palms. "And where do I fit in?" Mitchell looked up. "As Caleb's guardian if I'm gone. As someone with voice, not just proximity." She hesitated. "That's not what I'm asking." He stood too. "Then what are you asking?" Her voice was soft. "Are we doing this as a partnership? Or am I just the caretaker who came in through the back door?" Mitchell stepped closer. "I don't have the answers yet. But I know I don't want you to leave. Not you, not Nova." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a draft, typed clean margins. Revised will, Soren Mitchell. It named Brianna Cole as guardian of Caleb. A second line had been added in handwriting. "In the event of my death or permanent incapacitation, Brianna Cole will make final decisions regarding Caleb's education residence and daily care." Below that, another line, faint penciled in as if testing the idea, household, to transfer to her full custody upon Caleb reaching 18, unless otherwise amended. She ran a thumb over the writing. "It's not signed." "Not yet." They stood in silence beneath the bell. Mitchell finally spoke again. "Do you remember the sketch you found in Emma's room? The woman with her hand on the child's head." He nodded. "She drew that the week Caleb was diagnosed. Said that's who he needed. I thought she meant a therapist." Brianna looked at the paper again. Maybe she meant a presence. Later that week, Nova visited for the first time in months. She ran through the hallways like they were hers, laughed at the elevator beeping, and called Caleb Little Mister, even though they were only 2 years apart. Mitchell cooked. Not well. He burned the toast and undercooked the eggs. But he tried. Caleb used his red tile to say laugh twice that day. And yellow once. After dinner, the 4 of them sat under the bell tree. Nova leaned against Brianna. Caleb nestled beside Mitchell. The light faded slowly. Mitchell pulled a small velvet pouch from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple brass key. "It's to the storage room," he said. Brianna blinked. "I've already been there." He smiled. "This one's to the drawer she kept locked. The one I never opened." She held the key in her palm. "You sure you're the only person who would understand what's inside?" She pressed it tight in her fist. Later that night, Brianna opened the drawer. Inside was a single cassette tape, labeled in Emma's handwriting, "For the day he laughs again." She sat on the floor, tears in her eyes, and smiled as the music filled the room. It was a lullaby, one she had never heard. But somehow it felt familiar. The proposal didn't come with a ring. It came with a casserole dish. Mitchell stood in the doorway of Brianna's room, holding a glass tray with the kind of lopsided macaroni a man makes when he's never cooked for anyone outside a boardroom dinner. "I tried," he muttered. "It smells like soap. I used oat milk. It went wrong quickly." She took it from him, set it on the desk, and looked him in the eye. "You don't need to impress me." "I'm not trying to impress you. I'm trying to keep you." The words hung heavy between them. Brianna sat on the edge of the bed. "You're not used to saying things like that out loud, are you?" "No." "Then say it again." "Like you mean it." He stepped closer. His voice cracked just slightly. "I don't want you to leave." She folded her hands together. What about your board, your family office? They're going to approve of this. I've spent my whole life building something that could survive public scrutiny. This, us, doesn't need their permission. Brianna looked at the framed sketch Caleb had made. I'm not asking for a wedding. I'm not offering one, not now, maybe not ever. He knelt before her, not as a proposal, but as a confession. I'm offering presence, permanence, choice. She touched his cheek. Only if Nova is part of that picture. She already is. Later that week, they met with the estate lawyer. New documents were drawn. You understand what this means? The lawyer asked Brianna. You'll be named as co-guardian with discretionary authority over Caleb's developmental, financial, and medical needs. Brianna nodded. And if something happens to me? Mitchell slid a sealed envelope across the table. It's all written there. The next day, Ava approached Brianna in the hallway. Someone called from the foundation gala. They wanted to know who you were. Brianna smiled. And what did you say? I said you were the woman who changed the temperature of this house. In the garden, Caleb ran. Not walked, ran, chasing Nova in small, quick steps. She squealed, turned back, grabbed his hand. Mitchell and Brianna watched from the porch. He looks... Happy Brianna finished. Mitchell reached into his coat pocket and handed her something. A worn photo. Emma and Caleb from years ago. On the back in faint pencil, a second line had been added. If she comes, let her stay. They sat beneath the bell tree again, not needing to speak. For the first time in years, there was no clock ticking, no board meeting, no exit strategy, just the sound of children laughing under the spring sky, and a silence that didn't feel empty. That night, Brianna tucked Caleb into bed. He reached for the yellow tile, then paused. You, he whispered. She touched his hair. Yes, baby. Me. He placed the tile in her palm. Stay. She kissed his forehead. I already did. The camera clicked just as the wind nudged the iron bell into motion. In the photograph, Brianna stood with one arm wrapped around Nova, who grinned up at Caleb, perched on Mitchell's shoulders. Mitchell wasn't smiling wide, just enough to crease the corner of his mouth, but his hand rested gently on Brianna's back. Behind them, the bell swayed, its rope frayed. The tree once ignored and overgrown now bore signs of life. Tiny wind chimes made from puzzle pieces Caleb had painted. The photo was framed, not digital. Hung in the entranceway. No title beneath, no plaque, just a presence. Visitors noticed it, but never asked. Those who came for meetings in the estate's lower wing, donors, lawyers, consultants, learned quickly that the house no longer operated by silence. Laughter occasionally echoed down the halls. Shoes squeaked. Music played on weekends. Brianna's name was now listed on the house registry. Not as staff, not as tenant, but simply as resident. The contract she once lacked was replaced with permanence in action. No press release was ever issued, no interviews granted. But those who had once dismissed her, Ava's former peers, Sylvia's social circle, learned through whispers and committee updates that the woman they tried to erase had rewritten her own role, not with noise, but through unwavering presence. On the second floor, a shelf was added to the family study. It held Caleb's first spoken-word journal, a blue tile marked with the word safe, and a copy of Brianna's handwritten letter to Nova family is not assigned. It's chosen. And sometimes it chooses you back. That evening, Brianna sat on the porch as dusk settled. Mitchell joined her holding 2 mugs. He only cried once today. Same as me. They sipped in silence. In the garden, Nova pointed at the bell and said, "It's gonna ring." And it did. low and steady. Perhaps tonight, silence isn't empty. Where are you listening to this story from? Let us know in the comments. Like, share and subscribe to Fanciko Stories to hear more about the ones they tried to forget, who quietly changed everything.